Tim Goldstein, autistic adult, and your host for Life in a Neurotypical Universe, where we take a look at life from the perspective of an autistic adult.
This is episode 2 of Theo Smith at Life in the Neurotypical Universe. We, of course, had a long conversation, as quite normal here in Life in the Neurotypical Universe, and it turned into 2 episodes. So you're catching us now starting on episode 2. If you didn't hear episode 1, go back and check it out, because Theo has lots of great things to say. And if you already did, well, let's dive into episode 2 so you can enjoy the rest of the conversation. You know, I want to back up to something that you mentioned, you talked about a little bit, which is communication. I focus a huge amount on communication. And listening to you speaking, you have emotionality in your voice. And I think I have some emotionality in my voice also. Now, mine was learned. I went to the best vocal coach in the world and was trained. He actually told me, I'm going to teach you how to put emotional sounds into every word that you say. That's it. That was his goal. Get emotional sounds in my voice. Because I used to be one of those stereotypical monotone speakers that went way too fast and was really boring. And we all know that style. And the other thing that you mentioned where this fits in is masking. And too many people, I think, and when I say too many people, ND people, want to say that anything that is different than what feels normal to their, quote, authentic self is masking. Well, neurotypicals have to conform to some general standards also. And I look at it as if you and I were, deciding we wanted some good food and some great art, we might go to France or we might go to Italy. Good food and great art, both places. Now, would it be useful to learn a few words of their native language so we can find the bathroom? Probably be helpful to have that. Is that masking, or is that using a tool that's going to help us interact better? And I think we have too many times that we're doing things that are really using a tool and calling it masking. Now, I agree there's masking where you're trying to totally suppress that you're different at all. Okay, there is such a thing as masking. It is excruciatingly stressful. It is damaging. It is not good. But not everything that is different from the way you would do it if you were in the middle of the woods and could do whatever you want to do is masking. I think a lot of it is using tools that we've learned as humans to allow us to have civilization and socialization. And one of those, and this is where the communication part comes in, is the majority of individuals in the world I would essentially say emotion leads logic for the majority of people. You react from the emotion first, and then maybe if you can get past that, then you'll process the logic part for a lot of people. In the ND community, that can be different. And because of the style of their communication, not necessarily the words they're using, although that can be part of the problem also, but just the style, the monotone, the flat affect, the no emotion in it, is conveying things that are making the receiver not process the message the same way they would as if you and I were saying it, where there's excitement, there's emotion, there's liveliness there. And to me, that is one of the areas that we need to start teaching people that that's a tool and you need to learn to use the tool. And how do you teach it? I don't know. You're the one that went through drama school. I mean, I'm sure that you've learned some of your dynamic style came from acting and from going through drama and such. Mine was by studying with one of the best singing vocal coaches in the world, who obviously singing, delivering emotion. It's all about the emotion. It's not the words, it's the emotion that counts. So I don't know, I'm just going to throw it out there. What's your thoughts? I think it makes you a far better communicator because a larger audience is going to be drawn into you because of that emotion. Then they're going to be now willing to listen versus if you were just talking like this and really flat and really boring. About 3 minutes in, they're Zing out, man. They're just like falling out of their chairs. God.
So I won't profess to have enough data and insight in my head to be able to say why people end up communicating in the way that they do, right? And there'll be multiple reasons why somebody may talk and it may come across being quite flat or being quite negative or being quite angry or being like disengaged or so many different things, or being too energetic or any number of other factors that people so often call me too empathetic. Too empathetic? Do you know what I mean? Like how like you're hitting me with too empathetic? Like that's something I should go home and cry about, that I need to adapt and change myself because I'm too empathetic. That is something I can live with. If that Theo was too empathetic on his grave, I'll take it, right? I'll take it. That is something I can live with. But I think that's again it. So if I think about the context of masking there, is somebody talking in a very flat, monotone way because they've not been listened to, because they've been ignored, because they've been disregarded, disengaged, disconnected? Perhaps when they were in school, for example, they may have been bullied, mistreated. So like all of these factors, you build these early experiences when you're a young person, and let's call that trauma, right? Because that the level of some of the stuff that happened then when you were a child, most people are not realizing the physiological responses you're getting as an adult are because of some of those things. I can explain some of them if you like, but ultimately, some of these things is what a lot of us struggle to come to terms with things that happened in our childhood. And so I don't know whether or not the way that some people communicate is because they are autistic or because of the way that they've been treated by others. And therefore, part of that I'm then questioning is masking, that there's a lifetime of masking, i.e. not talking in a way where you're going to be seen or heard or looked at because you're keeping it low key. You're not using too much emphasis. You're keeping everything quiet and back and down. And so you won't be noticed, so people won't bother you. And you'll say as little as possible. Like, I'm not trying to label people with that, right? Because I'm just saying that is just another concept and thought around somebody's life journey and why they may be the way that they are. And they may be autistic, right? So, and they may have had all those experiences, and possibly the way that they respond and engage is because of those experiences, not because of their neurological makeup, right? Now, somebody else may be nonverbal. That may not be to do with their experiences as a child. They are not. There's other things that are happening neurologically that are beyond my level of expertise to talk about, right? But I just think if we start to think about that, then what we think about masking is some things. I agree, you're right, actually. We conflate these things. We put them together when they're not. And sometimes by using them in one context, we actually devalue them in another context. And if we overuse these phrases, then it becomes the same thing as people going, well, we're all a little bit ADHD, or, I was a bit dyslexic when I made a mistake. No, you weren't a bit dyslexic. You made a mistake. People make mistakes. But there's a difference between making a mistake with your spelling and not seeing the words in the way others see them, not seeing the letters in the way others see them. And that's important. And I think probably the same with masking. People mask differently because of their life journey. Sometimes it's masking, sometimes it's not. But I do, coming back to your point, believe that we need to empower individuals. We need to empower individuals to better understand how to leverage opportunities, to your point again, which is whether it's teaching, coaching, or just letting people into the secret. We see the same secret in other areas of DE&I where people have faced blockers because of their gender or their ethnicity or whatever other blocker, right? We need to let them know what the secret is to get in the thing that people with a different skin color or a different gender just get. They just get it. If you're born into a family of doctors, much easier for you to become a doctor, right? If you're born into a family of lawyers, so then put that out into or the whole wide variety of human makeup, right? If the rules are there from the beginning of time when you were born, it's much easier for you to follow those rules. Those rules exist in every facet and aspect of human existence, right? We often don't think about them too much, but they are there, right? For somebody to get a job in a certain organization, in a law firm where there's not a single black person there, for a black person to get in, they don't know the rules, right? They don't know what they have to do. And do we just say, well, that's the end of it? Or do we say, actually, we need to provide the individual with the tools to know, whilst educating the employer, they need to open up their doors to let this person through. Right? It's that combination which is really important. And I think that's not to diminish somebody's feeling that they've had to mask, because there's a lot to unpack there. But it is to support them and say, well, you shouldn't have to mask so often. And you need support with that. But also you need to understand, you need to understand some of the rules. And that it's not all going to be one way. Right? We can't change the whole world for you. We have to change some parts of the world because they're not working for everybody. But we also have to give you the key to unlock the gate when you get there. And I think that's really important. And if we start to think of it, that comes back to working together. It comes back to breaking down barriers. It comes back to saying we can talk in our community that we feel comfortable in. But at some point, somebody is going to have to stand up and talk with the rest of the world. Otherwise, we seek segregation over inclusion. And that is not productive. And I know sometimes it feels easier and better just to go into our little defined group that we've made for ourselves and sit comfortably there and never want to go out. But that's not good for the world. That's not good for the progression of human race, right? We've seen too much of this. Segregation of views and people going into this small little environments and not wanting to come out. The problem is at some point we all have to come out. At some point we have to engage with those we may not have wanted to engage with. And if we don't start to make effort to do that in some meaningful way, where we know we're going to hear things we disagree with, we know we're going to hear things we might not like, but how can we influence it?
You said something that was, this is so interesting to me, which is that sometimes, again, we were talking about flat affect, flat monotone kind of voice. That is actually a masking that built up over years for the person. And when you talk to them and start saying you need to put some emotionality in, because most humans aren't going to respond well to you if you don't come across with some emotional tone. And then they want to tell you that's masking. And the reality is, I think you're right. They've been masking so long that they now think that's who they are. Whereas if we went back far enough, found them in kindergarten, they probably were using ranges of tones and different volumes and all different word lengths and all those different emotional cues that come across in our vocality. So I never quite thought of it that way, that essentially they've been, for whatever reason, and as you say, it can be a million reasons. It can be neurological, it can be how they were treated, it can be how they were told by everybody you're worthless, they're no good, whatever. It's a million reasons. But it comes to the point where they start losing sight of what the mask actually is and think the mask is who they are, When really, if we could strip off that mask and let out who they really are, that was really the secret that they need. You got to go in and be, a little more lively. You can't be that suppressed and just quiet and sit in the back, because nobody's going to think that you're going to be able to do very much. You're just worthy of being led around like sheep because you're kind of sounding and acting like sheep. So you got to come in with a little bit of excitement. I know when I was doing my interviewing of recruiters, and I happen to love recruiters, by the way, supported my career for years and years through recruiters. So when I interviewed recruiters, HR, hiring managers, when I was writing my Geek's Guide to Interview book, and the question that I would always ask them is, you have a candidate that is 100% qualified. I mean, they have check every single box. They are so qualified. They got everything on the wish list, but they don't get the offer. Why did they lose the job? And this was the answer that was virtually universal across every single person I asked. They didn't express enough interest in the job or the company. In other words, they didn't say, sounds so exciting. I'd love to be working at this company. When do I start? Instead, they just, thank you very much for interviewing. Okay, bye. And they just judge that as saying, well, the person's qualified, but I don't know. They just don't seem like they're very excited about being here.
And it's human nature, isn't it? So if you say to somebody, oh, would you like to come for some dinner or some lunch? And they're like, nah, well, I suppose so. You kind of feel like, right, okay, well, I'd rather spend my lunch with somebody who wants to come along.
Right.
But the other challenge that we have with that, which is what we need to challenge the recruitment and HR world about, and hiring managers, is that individual, again, may lack self-confidence, and other people may have put kryptonite in the world that has harmed them. It doesn't mean that they can't do an incredible job. And again, that just comes back to the point of it's like the two-way piece of, we need to help human beings better advocate for themselves, see their strengths, which they often don't. They lose sight of their strengths. What are you good at? What do you like to do? And they just, maybe sometimes they've lost it because they've worked for the same company for too long, and they lose sight of it. And when people can lean into their strengths, often that's where you see the energy come.
And I think
but they need to see it. They need to know what it is.
I think it's, as you were saying, you've got to let the people know what the secrets are for the different things. And if you're in the recruiting field, then obviously one of the secrets you probably want to tell somebody who's going to interview is, at least at the end, say you're excited to go work for them.
You want to do the job.
Right. Even if there's nowhere else that you're excited, at least at the end, think about your favorite special interest and just say, what a great place. I'd love to be here. But again, that's one of the secrets that most people don't tell you. That I know when I was starting to do my whole book thing, I sat down with some of my geek buddies. I think one of the people was ND. Another one, borderline. Third one, definitely, no, neurotypical. And I asked them what they thought was the number one challenge that they had. And they were all in the tech field. It was all database people, actually. And what was the number one challenge that they felt they had when they were interviewing for a job? And what they all agreed, the number one challenge was convincing all the people they interviewed with how technical they were. In other words, they didn't know the secret. The secret wasn't to convince them how technical you are. The secret was to convince them how excited you are to work there.
And often the other thing is, I think what very few people really consider about is how much managers interviewing generally don't like interviewing. So you go into an interview, being interviewed by somebody who really doesn't want to be interviewing you. They need somebody in their team. They want somebody in there. But especially if that is a very structured interview process, which may be evidenced better to show it's fairer, more transparent, but can make it really difficult to be human. So then the manager's thinking, oh, I've got to go into this process where I'm not going to be human. I'm not going to be myself. I've got to make sure I've got everything down. I've got to make sure I score properly. I've got to make sure I've got to do all these things to be fair and transparent. But then I barely look at this person in front of me. And then I'm having to make judgments quick judgments because I'm missing so many of the human connection points. And because the candidate doesn't know that, often not thinking about it, the candidate can be completely disengaged or disempowered by the fact that they see people in front of them that themselves don't look enthusiastic by what's going on. And then they're like, I want to work for this company where these three people are just, they look like they're going through the motions, but they're concentrating, they're trying to make sure they don't embarrass themselves and maybe in front of HR who might be sat in the room or whatever it is, or their manager. So I think these very important lessons that you're right, often don't get shared. Expectations are so high for managers, so much pressure, and they have so little time in a lot of organizations as well. So we raise these expectations of what managers should be doing, and we keep raising the bar in terms of what they should be delivering, and without really considering the impact on them, their mental health, their well-being, and they may be ND as well, right? So you think of all these things. So I think it's easy to always put the focus on an organization should, a manager should. And I'm a big advocate. That's why I do a lot of my work is doing influence in organizations and managers. But I do think empowering individuals is just so important, helping them see what they can't see, helping them feel what they may not be able to feel in that moment because they may not have felt it before, helping to go through those experiences. That means it's not the first time, because if somebody asks me to walk from A to B and it's the first time I've done it and I've got my phone, right, okay, Google or whatever else may be brilliant for taking me there now, right? But I still, in London, walk out of a tube and end up walking the wrong way all the time. And it takes me a good 100 steps to realize I'm going the wrong way. And my phone, good phone, but for some reason it loses connection with the thing quite often. So, and then where am I? Which way am I going? I'm getting all confused. My brain's spinning around. So because it's the first time I've done it, that little journey, it's high levels of anxiety, stress around the whole thought of it. And then the experience is not nice. I'm then in a major busy city with lots going on. So you just put that experience into anything you do in your life, right? If it's the first time you've interviewed for a particular type of company, first time you've interviewed in 10 years, or first time you've joined a team and sat with the team, like every single thing you do in your day, when it's a first, high levels of anxiety and stress, almost no matter who you are, right? And for people who are ND, if they face a lot of stigma and stress in their lives already, you can just amplify that by 50, for example. So being able to give people the key, being able to show people the path, being able to allow people to experience something before they have to go and do it is very, very powerful. And maybe there's something in that, right? Maybe there's something in organizations becoming much better at sharing the types of processes they go through and allowing individuals to go through test sites on scale so that they can really understand the types of processes and then the outcomes that come from going through certain processes, whether that's recruitment, onboarding, or whatever else it may be. Because I think that's where you can reduce the stress and anxiety. That's where you reduce the masking. And that's where you then enable people to at least be a little bit more comfortable and a bit closer to showing you their skills and their abilities. And let's be honest, right? What manager doesn't want to sit in an interview and hear somebody do well at selling themselves, right? No manager wants to sit in an interview and go, tell me about yourself, and get nothing back. So tell me how you built that piece of technology and get very little back, a yes or no. No manager wants to be sat there doing that. Really, you would just love to sit back and have this person tell you everything that you need done. And then you can score them effectively. You can make a proper decision about their skills and their capabilities. The problem is we don't live in that world because of all of the things that I've mentioned that can impact somebody's ability to share those experiences, those skills, those strengths, those capabilities. So I'm very much focused, and this is maybe next 12 months beyond, how can we democratize a lot of these systems, processes, assessment methodology? Because companies ultimately often have to go with focus on cost as well, which is not good for people if they don't have choice. So choice is a real powerful thing that we could provide to people. And until we find a way of democratizing some of these processes, we're going to limit choice. And if we limit choice, we limit accessibility. And if we limit accessibility, we're going to continue in this cycle of not bringing in the variety of minds that we really need for the future of organizations, for the future of governments, of leadership, of this world.
Yeah, I agree with everything you say. One thing, though, I think that this fits in. You didn't say this, but I think it fits into everything that you said, which is we no longer respect failure. Failure is if you fail once, and you were describing it. You didn't say it in these words, but you stepped out of the tube and you popped up the maps and you started walking the totally wrong way. And I do it all the time, and I hate using the stupid thing on the phone because I do the same thing. It's like, what way do I go first? You stupid idiot phone. You got to go the wrong way before it will tell you what the right way is.
Yeah.
And I think this, I'm seeing it more and more with younger generations that were diagnosed as they were in school versus older generations where we were diagnosed as adults or maybe not even diagnosed. And the difference that I see is the older workers have gone and just tried and failed enough times to figure out what's going to work. And the failure wasn't looked at as, oh, I failed, I'm just going to crawl back in my ball and sit in the basement and play video games forever. The failure was looked at, okay, why didn't it work? What could I have done better? Ask the recruiter, if you work with a recruiter, can you get me some feedback? Where did I not do well? All those kind of things. Try and improve through it. I'm convinced, and of course you read about very successful people, and this is pretty much true of almost every successful person, is that success is littered with failure on both sides of the road behind you. But we no longer respect that. And we say, that's it, I failed, I'm never going on an interview again. We don't look at it as being, oh, well, no, that wasn't a failure. That was a learning experience. And the fact that it didn't get the outcome you wanted, okay, that part was a failure. But the whole process was not a failure. The process was a great education. And when I started my own company, I started a manufacturing company. Zero background in it. Decided I needed 2 careers at once. So I started a manufacturing company. And I was blowing up $1,000 worth of stuff every night trying to learn to run these machines the size of cars of just bam, and there goes another $300 bit and pile of metal. But was that failure? I didn't consider that as failure. I considered that as don't do it that way again. And 10 years later, I had a company that was running quite well, producing really good products, and we were selling them around the world. But if I had stopped after the first bang when it broke, I never would have gotten there. So I don't know, what's just your take? Have you seen kind of a difference between people who found out that they were ND later in life versus people who found out they were ND essentially in their education system, primary or secondary school?
I think it's not that clear cut. I think it's there's a lot to do with the support that you may have had, whether that's from your family, the school system, any carers, any people responsible for your well-being. I think that plays a significant impact in how you see failure.
The encouragement, in other words, of your family and such. I would agree with you there.
I think so, yeah.
I would definitely say that, yes, I do know some younger people who had families that encouraged them to try. And when it didn't work, encouraged them to go back and try it again. And and learn through it. But then the term helicopter parent, of course, comes to mind, where they just drop in and save the kid every time something goes wrong. And we pin a participation ribbon on your chest because you showed up. When I went to school, you got first, second, or third, or nothing. And if you wanted to do better, you went out and joined the team, went to the coach, said, how do I get better at doing this thing? You put in the miles, you put in the reps, whatever it was. So I think you're right. Do you have parents that are encouraging you to say, no, that wasn't failure. That was a lesson. That was a good learning lesson. Let's move forward. But at least in the U.S.,
it's hard to know.
I think we have a lot of protectionism going on around the child, of not giving them that chance to essentially what you and I did. Probably, I'm guessing, if you were anything like me, if kids nowadays did what you or I did when we were kids, we'd be in jail.
Yeah. No, and I think that's true. It's and talk about that quite a lot. Obviously, within own family networks and things, the level of freedom I had as a child, rightly or wrongly, was significantly different to my children's experiences. But I also think that's the nature of the world that we now live in, this globalization, technology-driven, social networks, the ability to see and hear about things at the click of a button, which is really powerful, but also it adds a level of fear and anxiety around protection of children. And that can be problematic in terms of the development of that child sometimes. I sometimes think with my child, if she was just allowed to be on a farm and run around and just enjoy that environment and learn from that environment and do all the things that you need to learn in school, but in that environment, that would be such an incredible experience for her life, right? And I'm sure there's still examples across the world where that can be the case.
That was my example. I actually grew up on a farm and went to a school district that I was bused to that was a very, very top school district of mostly professionals. So I got the high-end education, and it was public school. But then I had the freedom when I came home to be a kid on the farm and chop down trees and build bridges over the creek and make bonfires and just, again, things that, we would be arrested nowadays for doing most of that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Some of those things are important. They're important for your development and your mental health and well-being. We try and, thinking about young people now, we need to try and find those moments for our children. We need to take them out into the forest, because actually quite easily you can think they don't want to do it, right? Because it's sometimes hard to get them out of the house. But the reality is when you get them out and when you get them into this space, into the forest, into the trees, into the mountains, and when you get them there and see what happens, see what's going on in their mind, it's transformative for all of us, right? It's good for our mental health and well-being to get out there. But certainly for young people, I think there is a lack of it. And a specific problem if you're in a major built-up city and where there's limited access, where you're from a low socioeconomic background, so limited funding and support to be able to get out, like that is problematic, I think, because I think ND brains do need that variety for brain stimulation. And otherwise, as I found, you can find it in negative places and spaces. And that can become addictive or impulsive. I would probably say more than addictive. I never feel I've ever been addicted to anything, but I've had high levels of impulsivity around doing things again and again and again and again. But however, being able to stop them really quickly if I find something else that takes my interest and engages my brain in the way that I need it to. So I'm definitely think that if we can, the younger generation now coming through, if we can find ways to engage the ND brains, then hopefully we allow them to focus on failure, focus on doing things again and again and not getting them right, but learning from it, enjoying it, ensure that they get to lean in their strengths. Those strengths should include going out. Those strengths should, it should be about getting out into the wider world. I do more of what I wanted to do when I was young. Now as an adult, I just do them in a different way. I'm not acting on a stage, but I perform on a stage almost every week. whether it's to organizations or in big events or in podcasts, or like, I'm doing the thing I always wanted to do. I'm just doing it with a greater value and level of purpose than I ever believed I could do it. And that is powerful. If we can get young people to learn quickly, to learn to fail quickly, and therefore to get to the place where they understand what it is that gives them energy, then wow, I just think that could impact some of the challenges that we have around health, well-being, people ending up in prisons. Yeah, all of these things, people spending too many years thinking that they can't do something, or that they failed once so that they should never try again, or that other people said that they weren't any good and that affects them so badly they never try again. Like, if we can capture people as early as possible, then I think that's where we can make a really significant impact to people's lives, and where they can go on and flourish and be very successful. But the education system's a tricky one. That
is a trick in there. I always say when parents that have particularly newly diagnosed neurodistinct children, and they ask, well, what should I do to give them a good shot in life? And my answer is always expose them to as many things as you humanly can. And the ones that they find that they like, as long as it's not dangerous. You don't want them playing in traffic. That's not a good, fun thing to do. It might be fun, but it's not a good thing to do. But as long as it's not something that is, overtly dangerous, if they have an interest, then indulge that interest. Let them dive into that, collecting bugs or whatever crazy thing it happens to be. It doesn't really matter. So I think that whole exposure becomes so important, as you say, instead of restricting them, getting them out into the woods, letting them see what it's like to go hiking up a mountain. And it doesn't matter that the first time that they don't get up the mountain. It might take 10 times going back before they actually make it to the peak. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But that exposure, I think, is, you're right. It's so important to be able to find out what is it that you actually do like. And I agree with you. As an adult now, I get to do all kinds of things that as a kid I always like to do, but now I get to do them on a whole higher level because A, I can afford lots of nicer equipment and fancier stuff and all that stuff. And B, I live in a state that has, and I tend to do a lot of outdoor stuff. So I live in Colorado. 52 peaks that are over 4,000 meters. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity to go out and kill yourself here. But I think that is so important to really, that enrichment, I guess you would say, is give them that ability to expose them to all these different things. And the school systems, you're right, are a challenge. I was fortunate. As I said, I went to a public school, but it was a very enriched public school. I was taught woodworking. I was taught metalworking. I was taught ceramics. I was taught electronics. I was taught working with plastics. Now we would call that a STEM education. Back then, they just called it shop class.
Yeah.
But those are things that have carried forward my entire life. Now, when there's an outlet in the house that needs fixing, it's like no big deal. It's like, go fix it. I don't have to pay a couple $100 to have an electrician come in and place one outlet. But again, I had the fortune of being exposed to this wide variety, and I had parents that were encouraging, and I lived on a farm where you could do a lot of stuff. So you combine it all together. And I think that's what makes a lot of the richness. I think another challenge that kids run into now is, and it's social media I blame for it, to be honest. And we could be blamed. I mean, heck, you and I could be a part of the fault just as well, because if somebody listens into this conversation that we have, you and I have been holding a conversation for, I don't know, almost an hour and a half now or so. And lively conversation back and forth, very enjoyable. And people say, oh, I can't do a podcast. It's too hard. I can't. Well, how long have you been doing this? How long have I been doing this? This has been years to get to this point that you can just freeform rap. I mean, it's really comes down to this is improv, and we're just improvising as we go and having a good time enjoying each other. And I think too many of the kids now see people who are on social media that have been photoshopped to death. They're doing it as professionals. You don't see the camera crew and everything that's behind them actually making them look like they actually look. And then they wonder why they can't manage to do any of those things. Well, it's because they don't have a $10,000 an hour crew with them that's making everything look perfect. So
exactly. Yeah.
I think that's a challenge is they see that and they don't feel they can ever reach that level, but they don't realize they're looking at, this isn't just another 18 or 20-year-old kid. This is a professional in an industry that's called social media.
Yeah, I think, and it's getting back to what is it that you enjoy about that? And that's what they need to find out, and sometimes I think for a lot of young people, they don't know. And it is a problem because it's taken me a good while to realize that the things that I enjoy, my strengths, are things that I can implement into my daily work. They don't need to exist separately. And if we think around the social media aspect of it, like the problem is most kids will be thinking about probably the money, fame, the notoriety, whatever it may be. But in reality, do they enjoy the process? And what part of the process do they enjoy? Do they enjoy making videos? Why do they enjoy making videos? Do they enjoy the editing of those videos? Do they enjoy so being able to support somebody to come way back, don't think, and this is a lesson for any creator, don't think about the size of the audience you want to create. Think about what you want to create. And if you focus on what you want to create and you create it with value and care and compassion and love, energy, whatever it is, if you focus on that, then you start to create something meaningful and you start to see the elements of that you enjoy, and then you can decide what you do from there. And it may well be that you're not going to become the YouTube influencer that you want, but you may well become the person who edits their videos, right? Or you may become a scientist or it doesn't matter, right? But it's just, it's like this. So you were right when you said earlier, we need to explore as many things as possible. Then we need to kind of capture what is it that we really enjoy and that makes us happy. Because otherwise we find ourselves sat in an office with 1,000 other people on a telephone. And before we know it, that's become our life and that's become our source of income and food and something that puts a roof over our head, and it sucks the life out of us, when really, if we had have understood that we need more vitamin D, therefore we need to do a bit more outside work, then, maybe it was important that we start to focus on the thing that we enjoy, which is some level of work that is incorporated to the outside rather than just being stuck inside. I mean, real base level understanding of what gives you energy. And I think not enough kids, not enough young people, not enough adults have the support to be able to really think about what those things are and then how that is broken down into little bits and pieces across your work, across your life, across your relationships. And when you really start to understand what gives you the energy and what you find are the challenges, that's when you can start to maneuver things around to allow you to have enough time in those areas that you enjoy, that also challenge you, but that linked with your strengths also, that then allow you to be able to deal with some of the things that you find really difficult. If we only spend too much time in those areas of challenge, of difficulty, then it becomes too big a hill to climb for us ever to go away. And that's where we opt out. And that's where people opt out and then make poor decisions. And those poor decisions can come back to haunt them for the rest of their lives. And so I think that's a very important reality of the world that we currently live in. And it's because there's these echo chambers that are not productive for some people. And that's why we need to cut through some of those echo chambers and allow people to see the reality of what's happening in the world. Like you said, we need to show them what's happening behind that individual And actually that individual often is probably not that happy because they're working ridiculous hours and they may be traveling around the world, but they may not see the world, and they may look like they're always done up, but they've been done up for the 3 minutes of video. And then, they may well go back to a place of poverty because you don't know what is happening behind that. Who is influencing it? Who is paying for it? Who is instigating it? So I think we all need to take a lesson from that, right? To be able to understand the reality of what's currently happening in the world.
That's the old saying, the grass is always greener on the other side, right? That influencer, they must have such a wonderful life. And you don't realize that it's work. It is serious work that they're doing. It's not a cakewalk by any means. Well, this has been absolutely wonderful, Theo. I have enjoyed chatting with you so much and could do it for probably hours on end. And we'll definitely have to chat again. But can you share with the listeners how the best way to reach out and contact you, and particularly if they want to engage you to come help with their company, speak to their company, or where do they find your book? How do we do all those things?
Yes. So LinkedIn is one of the biggest platforms for me as a recruiter by trade. It's where I spend a lot of time, and it's where probably the largest portion of the community that I engage with is in that space. So Theo Smith UK is where you can find me there. And I'm also on other social media channels, but you're probably best off getting me there. And my book, Neurodiversity at Work, that I co-authored with Professor Amanda Kirby, as you mentioned at the beginning, is incredible person who is a great advocate, evangelist, leader, technologist, entrepreneur, and a very lovely friend to have in my life. That book is published by Kogan Page, so that you can buy it if you're in the US or UK or most other parts of the world, either directly from Kogan Page or that lovely little place called the Amazon or Amazon. But you can find in lots of other bookshops as well that may be local ones that you would like to support. And we will, that won Business Book of the Year award last year for diversity and inclusion and belonging category in Business Book Awards, and which we're very proud about. And we're now going to start writing another book because we feel there's another gap that needs to be filled, which is why we wrote that book. I've got a podcast myself that you can find on various channels, Neurodiversity, Eliminating Kryptonite, Enabling Superheroes. And I've got a YouTube page as well. Most of the links you can find via LinkedIn. And I'm always happy for people to reach out to me, but you may have to reach out to me more than once because I focus on too many things at once, and the brain can really only focus on one thing at once. So you can imagine how many problems that causes me.
Well, wonderful. I will chase all those links down and actually put them down in the show notes. And thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing all the insight and wisdom that you gathered through your whole life journey. And I hope that you'll come back and join us again in the future.
Real pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me. Really enjoyable conversation. And I look forward to talking again soon.
We hope that you've enjoyed another episode of Life in a Neurotypical Universe. Please, if you enjoyed this, share it with your friends. Go take their phone and subscribe them. Heck, it will help us all out. If you want to know more about neurodiversity or have any questions for me, you can reach me at my website, timgoldstein.com, where I'll be more than glad to help you as best I can to navigate through the neurotypical universe.